Good morning, everyone. It's really great to see you all, and thank you for joining us for our Industry 4 in Action webinar, Enhancing the Interaction Between People and Technology in a Manufacturing Environment. I am Catherine Lai. I head up the Advanced Manufacturing and Export Communities at the EMA, that's the Employers and Manufacturers Association. So Callaghan has teamed up with official partners Becca and the EMA to deliver the Industry 4 demonstration network, which consists of a mobile showcase, the network of Industry 4 site visits, access to a smart factory to see cutting-edge technology in action, and this Industry 4 in Action webinar series. So this is a government initiative to help businesses realise the benefits of a range of digital technologies. It's IoT, it's AR, it's VR, it's AI, it's 3D printing, digital twins, and robotics, all designed to enhance manufacturing performance. But knowing when and how to incorporate these new technologies into your business model isn't easy, and that's where the Industry 4 Demonstration Network is here to help you adapt. This morning's discussion is super relevant because as we introduce these clever technologies, it really highlights the gap between the skills our workforce have and what they need to succeed in this new environment. We have Frank Phillips with us this morning. He's the Advanced Manufacturing Manager at ALMAC, and ALMAC are our delivery partner in the Industry 4 Demonstration Network program. So Frank will be leading the panelist conversation this morning around how they are adapting learning and development programs to help workers acquire new skills and enhance existing ones, which will become important as occupational needs and roles evolve over time. Now, today's panelists are Barry Williams, the Operations Technology Manager at Douglas Pharmaceuticals, and Liv Wilson, who is the Head of Learning at Douglas Pharmaceuticals. Douglas Pharmaceuticals is a New Zealand success story, a rapidly expanding pharmaceutical company with a reputation for high manufacturing standards, quality products, and an outstanding client service. Douglas was founded in 1967 by West Auckland chemist Sir Graham Douglas, who dispensed prescription medicines. In 1980, he turned his hand to manufacturing, and by the 90s, he was successfully researching and developing his own products for the domestic and international markets. Today, Douglas employs over 700 people and exports to 40 countries around the world. So thank you, Barry and Liv, for joining us. And our third panelist is Pam Roa, the Managing Director of Longveld. Longveld is a world-class manufacturer of primary food processing machinery, systems and equipment, and an expert in custom metal fabrication. Pam and her husband, Les Roa, founded the business just over 30 years ago, and they've been servicing the food sector in New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, and Indonesia from their base in Hamilton, employing 75 people. Their purpose is to be a team of courageous people creating remarkable things, and the quality of their engineering work is vital to the integrity of the global supply chain that delivers food from pasture to plate. Now, before handing over to Frank to lead the conversation, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So without further ado, I will now hand over the baton to Frank. Thanks, Frank.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Catherine. What a fantastic intro. Covered everything there around the Industry 4 Demonstration Network and what we're here to talk about, which is great, and really pleased to have some great panelists on with us. So kia ora, and we'll get into it. So first of all, we're going to start with Barry and with Liv from Douglas, and we're gonna just first of all kind of get some context here around what Industry 4 and digital technologies in your business mean for you at Douglas. So over to you.
Cool, thanks Frank. Thanks Catherine. So Industry 4 is literally for Douglas, it's the future, both in so much as it's where technology is heading, but also as a business in in New Zealand. It's for us to compete globally. We need to become better and more efficient. And automation, we think, will help us get the best. Industry 4 will help us get the best out of the resources that we have to optimize and really sort of punch above our weight throughout the world.
Oh yeah, really good point. It's interesting, Barry, there you kind of slipped a couple of words in around automation and Industry 4, and there's always that I suppose that historical or that mindset that's kind of evolving over time now, which that Industry 4 isn't necessarily all in that automation space. So is there anything in particular when you talk about Industry 4 for Douglas, is there anything in particular, outside of the automation space that that Douglas is particularly interested in going forwards?
Well, for us, it's all about data. Industry 4, I think, is anchored a lot on data and using data and analysing data. And it's exactly the same for us. We have a lot of machines, we have some automation already. It produces an awful lot of data, but it's all snapshots of a moment in time. So once we start gathering the full picture of what's going on, we can make really good real-time decisions, but also use that historic data to help with strategic thinking as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Barry. And maybe Pam, I'll maybe just flick over to you. A similar question around what does Industry 4 mean for Longveld? Have you got any kind of different views from a different industry?
Well, we are a first generation business, trade. It started as a very traditional New Zealand story with one tradesperson with a toolbox and a second-hand car, and so we're coming from this very hands-on the tools background. So while in a broad sense, Industry 4.0 is about total global digital connectivity, interconnectivity, for us, it's in a practical sense, it's just about exponential growth and productivity, just by integrating our people and our plant and our systems to have real-time decision making. That is because it's something that's fundamental for a change for us to be able to then go on and embrace all aspects of Industry 4. So it's at a very basic level for us, a starting point. Yeah.
So I suppose that's probably a good time to talk then around if we're kind of introducing Longveld, being introduced to this journey. What's been the real trigger or main drivers that have kind of got you engaged with the demonstration network and exploring some of these technologies?
Well, the trigger was actually the SIRI assessment, and taking advantage of that SIRI assessment and realising that, which is the Smart Industry Readiness Index, and having an awareness of Industry 4.0, but not actually understanding how do we as a trade business transform to be Industry 4.0 ready. So that was absolutely our trigger that actually opened our eyes to what does Industry 4.0 mean? What does it mean practically on our workshop floor? What does it mean practically for a fabricator or a polisher, or a young engineer that we've employed into our engineering team who's come straight out of university, and just huge range of backgrounds of the people on our team.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the SIRI assessment over time is actually, there's probably a couple of categories that some people are broadly aware of all these technologies that are out there and are wondering, well, actually I can't do everything, so how do I prioritize these things down? But actually it's interesting to hear you Pam, talking actually from almost coming at it from the other side and saying, well, actually the SIRI assessment itself is what broadened I suppose some of those horizons around actually there might be some solutions out there for some of the things that we're trying to improve in our business day to day. So it's interesting that there's kind of those two angles. You don't you can come into it with a bit of a but let's see what we can learn kind of approach, which is good to hear. Great. So if we take that to the next step, then both Douglas and Longveld, both on the journey at different stages, maybe, but still have been doing some different projects and things to introduce technology and Industry 4 to their business. But I'll maybe jump to yourself, Liv, around the people side and the learning and development side. So how have you focused on trying to get some buy-in from the teams as you've embarked on this journey, and I suppose it's going to become faster and faster into the future?
Yeah, great question. I think like Barry alluded to before, and yourself as well, that it's all about taking our people on the journey with us. We talk about not letting Douglas be left behind, but it's also about it's important that our people aren't left behind as well. So after the Surrey assessment, actually before the Surrey assessment, we started engaging with the Learning Wave about putting some of our people through the micro-credential for digital skills. So we've done that as a bit of a pilot to see like what does it take to take our people on this journey. And we had some really great feedback in terms of setting a really solid foundation for our people. But then the next step is looking at our own actual strategy. So as a P&C or people and culture strategy, our next in year 3 of a 3-year strategy, and it's all about being future ready and agile. So actually it's all quite aligned quite naturally. And it's looking at the skill set that's coming out of Industry 4 and how can we leverage that. So Barry talked about, it's sort of about data. Okay, cool. So how do we lift our people's capability for data analytics? And do we need to look at recruiting data scientists? And, if we're working with Industry 4, what are the skill set that our actual humans need to be able to work in that environment?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I'm sure, Pam, you'll probably have a view on this as well, around this nature of data and technology kind of supplementing what we're doing and giving us visibility and real-time information. But actually, what's your view around what our people need to do alongside that? Have you experienced any of that in Longvale's journey so far?
Oh, absolutely. And Liv, you're saying, you're using phrases that just absolutely gelling with me as well about, we're a business of humans. We're not a business of machines and processes. We're a business of humans first. And we too don't want to leave anybody behind. And at one stage we were talking about, we need to employ digital warriors. How do we find one of those? That'll solve our problems. They can tell us what we need to do. And now we've also used the Learning Waves digital training for a group of 10, 11, I think, of our team who are older tradespeople. I'm loath to sort of classify what older is, but essentially, and actually some of the people who did that training here were not our oldest team members, but because they had been so trade focused their whole career, they don't tend to use technology. And so that we found that really useful, and we're very appreciative of Buglet Systems for setting up that pilot. But yeah, getting back to basics and it has been while it's a strategy, Industry 4.0 and is part of our long-term strategic plan, but it looks quite tactical in our business at the moment because we're really going back to basics around those lean tools and now moving into digital lean and training the team to concentrate on what has to be completed today rather than what's traditionally common in the trades where you're focused on how many hours am I working, it's more about what do I need to complete today and getting the team used to talking about their work like that rather than hours focused, being more task focused, and using daily operational reviews and short interval managements, which are things that LMAC have taught us to drive that accountability as close to the process, as close to what's happening on the shop floor as possible. And that's the things that we've been, the tactical things we've been focusing on as part of that a wider strategy for us.
That's really interesting to hear, Pam, because a lot of the companies that I work with, we kind of go and have a similar conversation, a similar journey around, well, actually we can put in all these technologies and get some visibility, but actually unless our teams, our leaders are in a position with a skill set where they're able to understand and analyze the data that's being fed to them, able to carry out some effective problem solving, have that accountability themselves and drive accountability within their teams, all those things, actually that data can can come to not a lot if we're not careful. You know,
Yeah.
we could have invested time, money, resource into generating that technological development, and that what might feel like a step in the right direction, but actually in terms of tangible results for our business and our processes, it might not actually amount to much. So we have to kind of tie those things together and make sure they're hand in hand, because otherwise as a business we're not going to be moving forward. So yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned some of those foundational things that we've got to have in place to make sure that we get the benefits, which is probably quite a nice opportunity to just dive into some of that discussion around what maybe some of the benefits have been so far on the journey, either from some of the learning and development activities you've done or some of the technologies you've introduced. Maybe Barry, you could start us off with just touching on where you might have seen some results or some early indication of results from your journey so far.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So one of the good results of the journey that we've started on is pharmaceuticals. As you can imagine, it's some quite technical machinery required and processes, and it was always within the bubble of what is this thing going to do for this particular stage of a process. Whereas now I've got a flurry of URSs and other documents across my desk where they want the digital viewpoint, because everyone knows that they can't just buy what was good 10 or 20 years ago. They've got to buy a machine that not only suits now, but also gives us that capability moving forward to extract data, and whether we want to attach it to an MES system or whether we can pull other information out of it, and maybe even artificial intelligence, machine learning to help tune it. Quality are getting involved because they've got their own opinion on what they want to see. Production are getting excited over the fact that they can potentially optimize processes that, to be fair, have probably historically developed based on a lot of manual sort of data gathering and manual labor, that maybe could be streamlined down from 15 steps down to 8 steps perhaps, or something like that. So it's changing the way everyone's thinking on the BAU stuff for moving forward.
That's a really good point, right? When you think about actually changing the culture of a business, historically, maybe production, I know best around the machine I want to, or the process I'm going to run to get this result. But actually now you're saying that collaboration is probably getting a bit wider, people realizing that actually for us as a business to move forward, getting a few different perspectives on this next step and this improvement activity, whatever it might be, is actually going to be really beneficial, because we can start to make sure that things are tied into that longer term strategy.
Yeah.
I suppose the question for me comes when you look at that in reverse. Do you think there's been a challenge for you to become more agile as a result? Do you think that's added some potential roadblocks or potential kind of red tape in the way of some of a continuous improvement journey, or how's that looking?
Well, I mean, it's in the pharmaceutical industry, it's always difficult because it's so heavily regulated. So it's not like other industries I've worked in. It's not where you can just say, right, okay, let's try this and let's do this, and let's make this product a bit more agile, or take a different approach to it. So everything, and this is why we're looking at machines that we're buying in the future now, because everything has to be looked at. How does it affect the current process? How could it affect quality? Does it give us better solutions? It might be technically more advanced, but does it create bigger problems for us from a data integrity point of view? Which, as you can imagine, again, in pharmaceuticals is incredibly important.
Yeah. So with that in mind, then I suppose just talking around some of those results and that agility, I know that the regulatory environment actually, as an industry for pharmaceuticals, is actually having to change itself.
Yes.
Almost, rather than dictating the terms, there's been an element of the regulatory bodies having to shift with this trend of technology. I know whether you want to just touch on that, Barry, and give us a bit of an overview. It might be a bit.
Yeah, sure. So traditionally, pharmaceutical industries will be 5-10 years behind other industries when they're manufacturing, and the industry recognised that because of this natural conservative outlook and this whole amount of technology that was coming at us, that pharmaceutical companies were in danger of being left behind. So they created a process called Pharma 4.0, which is where all the leading bodies are getting involved in looking how Industry 4.0 can be applied, making sure that it stays within sort of pharmaceutical FDA guidelines. So providing advice to people, saying, it shouldn't be something to be afraid of, and even, to be fair, changing a lot of the way you think. So previously you would validate absolutely everything to the nth degree, whereas now they're saying, well, in order to help progress and move forward, take it more on a risk-based approach. So it's looking at it and saying, well, if it's potentially affecting product quality or customer safety, 100% you put every bit of resource towards making sure that's absolutely correct. But if it's not, then you can take a bit more of a pragmatic approach, and that's releasing the industry then to adopt all this modern technology and sort of keep up with other manufacturing industries.
That's really interesting. So when we're just going to jump back to that results question, and Liv, I don't know if there's anything from a results side from maybe some of the training your team have done, or from the SIRI assessment or anything like that, where you've seen, I suppose, the result not in a tangible process sense, but a result in terms of a change of attitude, change of culture, change of outlook. Have you had anything like that in the business so far on your journey?
I think the business as a whole is chomping at the bit to pick up the new skill set required. So literally last week we were looking at launching a technical training framework for our manufacturing floor. And it's looking at those real transferable skills. So when somebody can work on one machine, it doesn't mean that they're locked into that one machine forever and ever. What are the actual skills that they learn by operating that machine that is transferable to other machines as well? So I think they're really ready for that level of conversation to think, okay, well, what next? How can I grow my skill set further?
And I know it's something we talk about a lot with teams. We talk about it in the Smart Factory Showcase as well, which I know you've had a look at, and that's where we're talking where people's roles are changing, right? So my role might evolve from historically I've been doing some quality sort of QA processes or something like that, and I've been recording things on sheets of paper or maybe in a spreadsheet. My role now is changing to actually some of that data is being gathered for me, and actually I'm focused on the more value add side of how am I interpreting that data, how am I analysing it to check that the process is running correctly, and I suppose that's where that agility piece comes. So that shift in what work looks like for some of our team, how has that been tackled by, and maybe Pam will come to you first on this and we can kind of go to back and forth a little bit, but how is that potential change in some of the nature of the work for some of our teams? How have you handled that, I suppose, with the change management side?
This is a really key advantage from our point of view, because, so for instance, we're doing a 4-day week, but we're not yet at a 4 8-hour day week. We're at a 4 10-hour day week, again because of that, what our revenue being tied to time on the tools, but using Industry 4.0, the framework, our aim is to have and let me also just point out that the skills shortage has always been, and for 30 years it's been a challenge for us, other than at times of deep recession like the global financial crisis. And so we want to retain the team we've got, ensure that they are doing more interesting work, but able to be remunerated at a higher level, but have less time actually in the workplace, and have so that concept of creating meaningful work is a real focus for us, and the cultural shift that's required to get people to think in that way, that it's not about taking jobs away or removing work from people or cutting jobs because we're getting more productive. It's actually the focus is on the increase of productivity allows us to deal with the skills shortage, and at the same time create more meaningful work so we can actually all enjoy a better quality of life.
And that's not what I was expecting, Pam. when I asked that question. I think it's actually really eye-opening when you talk about it like that. I know yourself and Longveld a little bit, and I know the approach and the attitude that you as a business have got to your teams and the culture around, you know, the work-life balance and so on, and meaningful work. But it's really interesting that you talk about actually how does some of this technology allow us to enhance that as a really key aspect of what we are, you know, who we are as a business, rather than, you know, yes, great, you know, the productivity elements that have got to be there, and improving our processes to allow us to stay competitive. But actually, I've not really thought about it ever before from that perspective of what does it mean for work-life balance for people. Yes, you know, we've had lots of conversations with businesses in the past around what it changes for people at work. You know, how does your business as usual at work look different now to how it did maybe a few years ago? But I've never thought about that switch. So that's a really interesting thing to think about. And I know a lot of businesses have obviously got retention challenges at the moment. You know, that there is a skill shortage, and actually leveraging some of this technology that allows people to have more meaningful work, be enjoying the things that they're doing at work more, might actually play into that retention piece, beyond just the productivity. So yeah, that was really insightful. Thanks for
I mean, right now we're not a workplace full of robotics, and we're not heavily automated. We're certainly on an automation journey, and we do have we are using robotics at a basic level, but I'm spending a lot of time talking to our team about not to fear automation and robotics, that aspect of Industry 4.0, because it doesn't mean it's not a threat. Well, I'm trying to paint a picture and how it's not a threat. Of course, people still view it as that, and that's a big part of the change management piece. But to just draw a picture of how we can all move to work that's more fun and more interesting, and we don't have to do the very manually difficult work that's very repetitive, because we're a manufacturing environment, we're a trade environment, and so there are many aspects of that physically it's quite demanding.
Yeah. So from that perspective, then I might bring that same question round to the Douglas team, thinking around that journey and some of the results. How's the change management looked so far at Douglas? I know you mentioned some training you've done. You've got the technical framework. What's the results of that been? Have you seen any change in people's attitude, or have you had some challenging questions come back to you? What's the outcome there been?
I think similar to what you were saying before, it's all about normalizing the shift. So, and we'll talk everyone's ear off talking about, like, you can pay for your petrol at before you even pull into the petrol pump, but that doesn't stop you going into the kiosk to pay and grab a coffee. You can borrow a digital book for your Kobo from the library, but that doesn't stop you going into the library to see a librarian. You download music instead of going into, like, Marbeck's back on the old days on Queen Street. Like, just because there's new ways of working doesn't stop you from transacting the old way. It's not a threat, it's an evolution. And so we talk a lot about that. It's not taking something away, it's adding to the toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking away that fear. People read headlines and think, whose job's going to get automated, and it frightens them a little bit. Change can be frightening. So it's being able to explain that it's not that. Nobody wants a lights out factory. It's about giving people that extra bit of tools in their toolkit to be able to embrace this technology, but also keep on doing a lot of what they already do. That's there for good reason. Yeah,
and again, there's a few things to pull out of that when we talk about shifting sands. We talk about digital natives and the change in the nature of the people that will be coming into the workforce in the coming years as well. We've talked quite a bit about how we don't want to leave anybody in our business behind, and that retention piece is really important. But as we grow and recruit those people coming in, how can they actually contribute to us being comfortable with change? that those coming into the workforce now are, have probably lived through their entire lives of shifting technology, right? And it's just part of the day to day. Change is the norm for, is the phrase that a lot of people use. So how can we grab hold of that, with people coming into our business and leveraging it for the rest of the business? We're not wanting to, and there's a huge amount that, not to put it into two camps specifically, but there's a huge amount that our existing workforce and maybe some of our older or aging workforce can learn from that. But obviously there's the flip side of that. There's a huge amount that our new employees, younger employees, can learn from the vast experience and knowledge, right, that is always going to be required. So I think it's a really interesting kind of balance and trend that we're going through. And touching on that change management piece, I mean, for those who know me, have worked with me over the years, you'll know I love a good change management model. And this is, I thought I'd flash something up on the screen here just to give people a bit of a feel for the kind of things I talk about when it comes to change management. And we've just talked about some of the 5 ingredients of change, if you like, and we've just talked there about removing that fear. So there's a few things that we can do to help remove that fear, right? One is that vision. So I think we talked early on about that strategy side. Have we got a roadmap about where we're going? Then there's the skills piece. How do we talked about some of the skills training that you've done, whether that's basic digital skills training and getting people comfortable using digital tools, or it could be that more advanced end where we've actually got some of our team deploying technologies through the business, all the way through to motivation. What's in it for me? If my role is changing as a result of some technology coming in or a change in process, then what do I get out of it, and how do we focus on those positives? And like you say, removing that fear, there's actually a benefit for me here, whether that's, Pam, as you mentioned, a change in what meaningful work looks like and that work-life balance element, or whether it's a motivation in terms of your day-to-day is going to look different now. And always refer to the example that Andrew at Nortec, who are our Smart Factory Showcase, give around one of the roles there being to put several thousand screws into a set of assemblies on a regular basis, and that being moved to be done by a cobot. And obviously that's a shift within their strategy and their journey towards automation. But that person that was putting those screws in is now looking after and overseeing those robots, making sure they're kept fed, making sure there's no issues. So actually, that there isn't a loss of jobs there. There's actually an upskilling and value add work where they're able to enable the business to be even more productive and profitable. So there's some really interesting things. So really interesting model that I like to use. I talk about it a lot with clients, but it's just something that from a change management side, when we're introducing technology, how can we think about these 5 key aspects, making sure we've got a good aspect of each of those 5 in play before we start that introduction. Otherwise, we might see some of the emotions that you can see on the side of the screen there. So just a really kind of quick touch point. I don't know, Pam, if you've got anything else you wanted to add around change management before.
Well, Frank, I love that you brought that up, because this lives on my desk every day. There's no time on to zoom on that, but you could tell it's that model. I've just found that really, really helpful. I constantly remind myself what happens when you miss one of those steps. And it's been a real key learning for us is that if it's like pushing a ball uphill, rolling a ball uphill, and that's what it feels like some days, where you're making progress, but the minute you take your hand off it, it starts to roll backwards. And if you're not watching each of those 5 areas, before you know it, that ball could have rolled right back down to the bottom of the hill again. And we have had some false starts like that. But in reality, every day is a mixture of, some days it's 2 or 3 leaps forward, and we celebrate, and we make sure that we stop and celebrate, because it's really, really important to celebrate the small wins as well as the big wins. And other days it's a step forward, and we find we're 2 steps back, because we've missed a little telltale sign of one of those other things that's just we've just dropped the ball on. And key learning for us too has been you can't rely on one person to champion this in the business. You actually have to have a team of people that not just get it, but because not everyone understands every aspect of it straight away, but who really love it and love the idea of it, and love to share that knowledge and help bring others on a journey. But the concept of leaving no person behind that Barry and Liv and I have both talked about, that takes a lot of dedicated input every day. And you don't get it right every day. But what we've seen is the cultural shift for us has been from what's often has been an us and them kind of view between the trade staff that are on the shop floor and those who are the support team who work in the office, more office-based hours. This journey for us has removed a lot of that, because we have really the process for us has been taking the learning onto the floor. We've experimented with taking a team off the floor into more of a classroom environment, but that hasn't been as successful as actually just, for instance, working with our LMAC consultant or with our engineers, with our managers, going onto the floor and doing the learning with the team alongside them, and taking small areas of the business where we see the biggest need for a change, and just with that small team focusing on changing their world, but doing that with the support team and the shop floor team alongside each other while they're doing the job, while they're actually practically doing the work. And then seeing what works well and what doesn't, using that change management process, but always pushing for them to own it on the floor. And it just means that everyone sees each other it's built the teamwork, yeah, and an appreciation for what each different person brings. And we have a lot of younger people in our business, both who come from they've come through a university engineering background, or they've come through a trade apprenticeship path, and then we have a lot of the older, our aging workforce who are extremely experienced and practical on the tools, and that they've all got something to teach each other. And so enabling that environment where they can share their knowledge that's helping us with our journey. That's really important.
It's so great to hear you, Pam, as experienced leader of a successful business, talking so passionately about all of those subjects. Right? It's such a it's a really nice kind of story to be talking around when you're talking about those sharing of knowledge at both from those different kind of people in our business. So I'm just going to pause for a second and to everybody attending today, a quick reminder, we've got the Q&A open on the Zoom. So if there's anything specific you want to ask to any of our panelists, then please just pop it into that Q&A, and I'll kind of pass it on and direct it as we see fit to try and get a good answer. So please don't be shy if there's anything you want to find out a bit more about. But at that point, then we'll maybe move on to our next question, which really is around what does Industry 4 look like for you as in your different businesses? Do you view it as a tactical exercise? And Pam, you touched on this earlier. Or do you view it as a strategic one? What does the day-to-day look like in terms of bringing it to life? So maybe Pam, we'll start with you. How does it feel at the moment, day to day?
Yeah, as I said, it is absolutely strategic, and it's we have to align our strategy fully with Industry 4.0. But in a workshop environment, it probably to an outsider might look quite tactical and operational. But taking those tools closer to the work that's being done on the shop floor for our customers, and that's driving accountability to the team that's on the tools, and that's where we want decision making to happen out our day to day at that level as much as possible. I talk to our team, our leaders, about if we've spent the time to draw up a job description for a role. What is the point of that unless the person who holds that job description is able to do close to 100% of that every day and own that and have accountability for that, and be able to make decisions that enable them to do that job description that that they've been hired to do. With, you know, if the lack of productivity, if someone's constantly got to stop and ask for permission, or whereas actually lacks clarity, doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing, I mean, that's just so unproductive. So you know, that is tactical on a day-to-day basis, but obviously feeds into that a wider strategy of exponential improvement in productivity.
Great. So maybe over to Liv, from a Douglas perspective, and you mentioned you're in year 3 of a 3-year strategy cycle now. So presumably that means that there's some strategic thinking going on for you as a business. What does that look like? You know, is there some tactical stuff that you're still working on, or what's the strategy for the learning team in the coming couple of years looking like?
Tough question. I think the strategy specifically for the learning team will be working a lot with the likes of Barry and the business to really understand future capabilities. So not focusing on the now. We think we're pretty good on the now. We're pretty comfortable and that people are able to do their business, do what they need to do now. But it's like, okay, well, what next? Because we'd hate to be in a position where we're going to have to play catch up. We know that learning is pretty important and kind of helps underpin the Industry 4 movement. So yeah, we'll just be working up. We'll be really good friends.
And to add to that, one of the things that we've been looking at, and it's not just the operators, but also we've got a really great engineering team here, and some of them are great electricians, some of them are very skilled, experienced mechanical engineers. But the skill set from an automation point of view obviously isn't where we'd like it to be. So we're starting to get some of the guys trained up. I put together like an introductory automation training course to get some of the engineers, so they're not looking at it as just a black box in a machine that they can't have any. Because anyone who's worked with Industry 4 and automation knows that if you can get onto the machine and start extracting data, it helps with that troubleshooting process. And then it's sort of building up that, so it's not to do with me, it's a black box, I don't touch that, but to get them really getting into there, and then once they become more experienced, they can start offering sort of ideas and suggestions and get involved in that whole roadmap as well.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it, when you think about an old school approach around mechanically diagnosing what's gone on in a process or a machine when something's maybe not gone to plan, and opening that up to say, well, actually there's some support tools here that are going to allow you to make some decisions either quicker or make the right decision, because you get some more insight around what's gone wrong. But there is that potential mental barrier of actually that's going into a world that isn't something I was trained in, or isn't something I've had experience in for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it might be. So like you say, trying to break some of those barriers down is really interesting.
And we see it as a natural progression, because obviously one of the key aspects of Industry 4 brings is predictive maintenance. So moving forward, we get the guys comfortable with that, then we can get more involved in that predictive maintenance world, which should open up a whole pile of opportunities for them, information, data, sort of really getting involved in that whole technical aspect of Industry 4.
Yeah, great. So just on that and talking about those strategic elements, I've actually I've grabbed a couple of slides from the SIRI assessment that we did with the Douglas team, and so I thought I'd really quickly share the screen on that, and then I'm just really wanting to talk around the workforce learning and development, that as an aspect of the SIRI assessment that we talk through, and we get some input around where do we think we're at as a business right now on our workforce learning development maturity. And for Douglas, we're a 2 continuous. So we've got that, you see there in the little blurb underneath, kind of got a structured curriculum that our team go through, and that is exactly what you were talking about, Liv, around we're quite comfortable in the now. You know, we've got a proven method of keeping our team up to speed, bringing new people in and upskilling them to where we need them to be with our existing processes. But the next step for the business is to move into that more integrated space. And what we mean by integrated is really talking around that move to align organisational objectives to the learning team and the learning team strategy. So that's where, for example, if I jump onto the next slide, where we kind of brought that to life a little bit, was we know that some of the things that we're going to be doing in our in our processes on the shop floor over the coming years are things like connecting up our shop floor, increasing that level of intelligence, increasing and bringing forward more things like data analytics, problem solving, dashboards, all that kind of thing. Now, that's exactly what we're talking about when we're moving to integrated, is having a bit of a view of where our business is going and a bit of a roadmap. And we think we're going to do this first and this second really helps. Well, it'd be good to get your view, Liv, of whether that does help you and the learning team at Douglas to map out what's coming next, and therefore put your energy in the right place in terms of getting people ready for that. So yeah, it'd be good to just if you want to just maybe elaborate a little bit on that, around where the business is going, and are you finding that helpful in your role?
Very much. Yeah, very much. I've got that printed out on my desk. I don't have my desk with me, so but I do have that printed out, and it will be. So we're like smack bang in the middle of strategy setting for the coming year. So it will be driving some of the decisions that I make in terms of what we'll be building learning content and how we'll be collecting or connecting everything together. Historically, we focus a lot on humanistic skills, so continuous improvement focus, growth mindset, communication, all of that kind of thing. Now the big focus will be on those technical skills aligned with the future side of things, making it really integrated. And I think, like I said before, it will just be connecting with key areas of the business to figure out, okay, well, now's good, but what's the focus for the future? And then how do we build a solution that takes our people on this journey and prepares them for something that isn't even here yet? So it's a great learning challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that pace of changes can be quite daunting, right? We can be talking about a roadmap of technology, but actually 2 years into that, there might be a new technology that comes about, that it becomes accessible, to manufacturers across the country, and we go, well, hold on, actually, what have we been doing? Because there is that technical element of how do we use this and how do we use that, but actually that broader view of actually these skills enable people to interact with digital technology regardless of what that technology might be doing or interacting without knowing what that exactly looks like.
Yeah, so we were looking at workplace communication basics, like how to write a professional email as an example. And then ChatGPT comes along and it's completely derailed that as a learning opportunity, because actually, do they need to know that anymore, or can they just plug it into the tool? It
does 90% of my work, that.
Well, that's still not a lot, Barry, I know that.
I was just chatting to some tradespeople on the weekend in our friend network who we were talking about ChatGPT and how if you are someone who's in a small trade business and you're the founder and you don't have a lot of time for the paperwork, using ChatGPT to write your emails to your customers, to say, you tell it what kind of an email you wanted to write, and it gives you that framework that then you personalize. But it's gone just like this as far as uptake's concerned. I think 4 weeks ago, many people had never heard of it, and it's just gone boom. It's just fascinating. But that I wanted to pop in here and talk about the impact on recruitment. While there is a skills shortage, what we've learnt the hard way is that we should never recruit anyone who's available for the business. That we really need to be really, really clear on what are the traits and skills that we need to add into our workforce as we go through this exponential change. And we're always looking for people who are curious, no matter what age they are, curious. And that I think it's Alvin Toffler who talked about the need to be able to learn and unlearn and relearn. These are the skills that, if anyone out there is wondering, how do I adapt for this world as part of a workforce, it's understanding the need to focus on those traits as opposed to I've got to be the most experienced person to be able to win the job. And when we've long stopped that being the key criteria, a number of years ago. It's really about somebody who's adaptable for the modern workplace.
That's brilliant, Pam. You've really led into, I suppose, the next theme that I wanted to talk about was learnings on the journey so far, and it sounds like that for you is probably a key learning, maybe before you're even talking about industry core, but that change is going to be the norm, and bringing in those people that are adaptable or willing and want to change and evolve with the business are probably the people we want involved. So that's really interesting. From a learning side, then for maybe the Douglas team, Barry, Liv, is there anything that so far on the journey that you've learned or you think the business has learned that will help you going forward or help the people watching today in their organisations?
Oh, wow. Good question. I've learned that my enthusiasm for Industry 4.0 probably allows me to rattle off for hours and maybe annoy people a little bit. And other people may not have the same enthusiasm, but it's not because they're not as passionate as I am. It's more that it's that understanding and like you showed in your emotions chart thing before. It's what's in it for me? How does it affect me? People don't particularly like change, so it's learning to temper my overbearing love of automation and Industry 4 to make sure I'm not frightening people off. That's probably a good learning experience for me, I'd say.
That's great from a leadership perspective, right? As an individual, learning how can you best influence those teams that inevitably, like you've talked about, with that massively increased level of collaboration required on any move forward and improvement, which is the right thing in terms of keeping us on line with strategy. But actually, that means that we've got to be careful around how we influence in those decisions and the people involved in them. And we've got to change our style to make sure that we get that outcome that we're looking for, right? So how about you, Liv? Is there anything from a learning perspective that you've had in your team or you've seen in the business?
I think I'm only 18 months in at Douglas. I think you and I are about the same. And I've come from banking where we went through this process, or a really similar process, and it astounds me that something so fundamentally different in the industry, from banking to pharmaceutical manufacturing, actually the problems are the same. Like, it's exactly the same regardless of the industry. And from listening to Pam this morning, it feels like it's almost exactly the same regardless of the scale. We're all facing into it, just with a slightly different entry point.
Yeah. And what is that, I suppose, from a learning perspective, that's a really insightful, because then that actually, does that mean that some of the people I'm looking to maybe employ in the business, actually, I know that you've got some confidence that the skill set they're going to bring is actually still going to help you with the challenges that you've got, because the challenges are the same. Yeah. So that's a really interesting one. I hadn't really thought about that. Great. So just conscious of time, and we're heading towards wrapping up. But again, just to those on the webinar today, it'd be great if there's any other questions you want answered by the panelists, then please do drop it in there, and we can get some feedback from them before we wrap up. The last thing I really wanted to touch on was really around advice, because the purpose of doing these webinars, the purpose of the demonstration network, is for manufacturers, primary processors in New Zealand to learn from each other on their journey, and what they've picked up, what worked well, what didn't. So maybe just a bit of an open discussion on, is there any one particular piece of advice that you would give to other manufacturers out there listening to this to help them on their journey? Maybe we'll start with yourself, Pam. Is there anything that jumps out?
My advice is very much targeted at others who are in trade businesses, plumbers, sparkies, welders. Whether you're a sole operator or you have a small team. It's not that long ago that we started with one. We were a team of 10 to 15 for a long time, and our 30-year journey's taken us here to 75. But there's a lot of things that we're still connected to as to how we started our business. That Industry 4.0 is not a fad. It's not this thing that's going to come and go, and then everyone will kind of talk about it as that was something that was a fad. This is a revolution. It's not called the fourth industrial revolution for nothing. It truly is a revolution. And I know that the age that Les and I are at, there are a lot of our peers in trade businesses that are looking to what's that succession plan, and wanting to sell their business. But if you haven't actually understood Industry 4.0 and incorporated into your business, then it's not that attractive for someone to want to buy into. It's kind of keeps us stuck almost in the dark ages now, is how it feels to me. If you're not understanding what the impact of Industry 4.0 is, so it's actually a tool to be able to leap forward, and it's really, really important that small business in New Zealand really does learn about it, upskill on it, and embrace it and incorporate it into your business. Because without it, we become dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's again, Pam, you've kind of dumbfounded me again, because I hadn't thought about that angle around the nature of some businesses. If you are looking to sell your business, move your business on that succession plan like you talked about, then actually there's a huge insight there around actually that to make your business attractive to that sale process is going to be really important to bring in some of these technologies. So that's really good to hear. Maybe over to Barry, Liv, any particular piece of advice you would give to anybody kind of starting out on your Industry 4 journey?
The first thing I'd say is ignore Industry 5. It's a marketing tool. Stick with Industry 4 and take that first step. Exactly as Pam says, it's once you've started down the journey, you'll see all the benefits, whether it's a long-term benefit of being able to sell your company. For us, it's going to be a benefit for attracting the right people, but also winning, customers that we supply to as well, because we're heading down that road, and you can count on the quality that we're able to guarantee because of embrace of Industry 4.0. But don't think that you've got to go out and spend $20 million to get there. It's a step. It's a journey for you and your team to go down.
Awesome, thanks, Barry. And Liv, anything from you from an advice perspective that you'd want to pull out?
I just wholeheartedly agree with everything that Pam and Barry have said. I think Pam actually said it really lovely before. Just get curious. That's the biggest skill set you can have. There are so many resources out there, so many people out there. Just ask the question, and everyone's just so genuinely helpful when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yeah, great. That's a really, really nice note. So in that case, we've got one question come in through the Q&A, and Pam, I'll maybe direct this one to yourself, because you did talk about it a little bit earlier. So James has asked a question that we've talked a little in generalizations around maybe some of our older employees being more resistant and less willing to adapt with some of these new technologies, and maybe our younger employees automatically being a bit more fluent in this space. But what's your experience been? Does that generalization hold true, or have you seen something different to that, through the journey you've gone on?
Well, it is a generalization, and there are always exceptions, of course. But within our business, that tends to be the case. But by taking our, particularly our young engineers, and really putting them at the heart of our Industry 4.0 journey, and putting them out on the floor alongside our older trades staff, it's amazing the magic that happens. But you do have to keep an eye on initially you need to be able to support that conversation, right? And we always start with, well, what is it that's proving difficult for you in your work? What is frustrating you? If you start with what's frustrating people, and you let them lead a conversation on how to solve that, and you truly listen. The listening has got to be it's really important, and give people the space to actually talk about what those frustrations are, rather than leaping in with solutions and new technology and this is how we're going to do things now. Just having that conversation, that dialogue, that solves a lot of difficulties up front. And it just builds, and also giving people space to see each other in action, giving people space to shine, so others observe them doing what they're really good at. That builds respect amongst people who previously may not have been able to imagine what each other does for a job. Like what's it like walking in your shoes? The more you can allow people to walk in each other's shoes in your organisation, then the quicker you build that teamwork and that trust. So those are the things that I think are really important.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pam. I think that's a great way to kind of start answering that question. We've got a couple more coming through on the questions, but what I'll do is, just in terms of time, we've just ticked over midday, so we're going to wrap up there, but we can try and answer some of those questions that are coming through. I'll put those to the panelists outside the session and maybe try and get back to those that have come in. It just leaves me to say thank you very much, Barry, Liv, Pam. You've been fantastic panelists, answered my questions, but also given us some real insight and things that I'd not even considered when it came to some of those topics. So thanks for coming on. If anybody wants to know more about the Industry 4 demonstration network, wants some support, as Liv mentioned, around, there's lots of helpful, friendly people out there with this kind of stuff, then do head to the industry4.govt.nz website. That's where all the info is around the demonstration network, and there's lots of things that Callaghan Innovation are doing as well. So do check them out for some of that support. So and we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much for attending.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Take care, team.